All right. Let's see here. This should be pretty good.
Yeah, good to go.
Good to hear. I got to see myself in a mirror 1 second. I'm gonna use you as a mirror. I got a face for radio, as they say.
That's what my dad told me growing up.
All right, cool. Well, I'm ready to go when you are.
Awesome. Well, let's just do it, man. Thanks for taking the time in the middle of your day to come have a chat.
I appreciate it. I love the show, and definitely glad to take the time today.
So before we get going, we were just kind of reminiscing, talking about Thailand. What was because I think a lot of Bitcoiners have at least had thoughts about possibly in the future relocating for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of turmoil, maybe it's to have a better, quality of life or jurisdictional arbitrage or something like that. How was your trip throughout Southeast Asia and Thailand?
I wasn't quite going out to look for my future citadel quite yet, but it definitely was a chance to, number one, take some time out, mostly in California, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And so it was great to, get out there, had spent some time with some family and friends. And so it's always good to refresh the perspective. And, one of the things about, the Bitcoin community in general, it's particularly important to get out of your bubbles that you live in, whatever it is, because inherently this is a technology and a social experiment that is fundamentally global. And I guess continuing to refresh that perspective, keeps you humble, keeps you focused on the broader implications of it.
I find for me when I travel, it really puts you face to face with some of the reasons, some of the cases for Bitcoin, because I think we have our higher level cases, and then maybe down the line we have just kind of annoyances that we think a future Bitcoin world would fix. But, just going to those cash exchange places that are all throughout, Thailand and Southeast Asia, I don't know if you had to use them, but, I always approach them thinking, this is so unnecessary. This doesn't need to exist at all, And then, not to mention the fees and the forex spread that they're charging and all that kind of stuff. But it's something when you travel, you really get to realize how much friction there is in finance and money.
I had a couple of incredible moments during. It wasn't incredible, but where I was just trying to pull cash out, and I was in a car, and I think I visited 6 or 7 ATMs, waiting in the lines, only to find out that for whatever reason I was not going to get cash there. Some is probably user error on my part, but that is a reality that most of the world lives in. And like you said, it's good to see some of these applications where you're like, Bitcoin fixes this for sure.
Yeah.
But at the same point, it's not necessarily fulfilling that in a broad scale like you'd like to see right now. And so we get to live in the broken system with ideas of what could be, and what could be fixed, even if it's not happening now. And I guess in some respects, being someone who, runs a company, particularly looking at, the U.S. and, North America, you're like, wait, should I be focusing elsewhere right now where has even more immediate and drastic changes could happen? So it's good perspective change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and in many places, it's Gresham's law in action. I don't know if you went to Laos or Cambodia or places like that, but they're more than happy to take Thai baht or U.S. dollar. But if you ever get Lao Kip or whatever the currency might be in exchange, you're going to have a real hard time getting rid of that, especially if you ever leave the
Let
country.
let's just say I came home with a bunch of Lao Kip souvenirs. I wasn't aware of that actually going in, but yeah, I got stuck a little bit.
Well, I thought when I went back to Thailand, I'd be able to change them at the currency exchange shops, and not one, I've been to several, will accept Lao Kip. So, and all I wanted was a cinnamon bun on my way to the airport. I had to break a thousand baht or something like that, and I got, basically I paid 1,000 baht for a cinnamon bun. But it's an interesting way to think about things, because that was kind of the promise of, or one of the promises of Bitcoin early on, banking the unbanked, that whole narrative. And obviously I think that's important because it's a very, the lifestyle upgrade to be derived from having a more secure store of value and a more frictionless, less costly means of exchanging that value is, very, very important. But when people kind of say like, we didn't really achieve that goal, I'm kind of thinking, is it not more important to kind of wrest the power of the control of money from the kind of governments and states and power structures that have that asymmetric lever of power over the rest of the world first, and then let it trickle down after that?
I could not agree more. Although I have a good caveat for this one, but yeah, I think just the pure existence of it, and building the case that it absolutely does provide a new check or balance of power that previously did not exist. It takes a while to really develop the infrastructure to make that counterbalance enough to even stand up to the current system that we have. And so it's going to take a while for that sediment to build, and it's not something that can happen instantaneously. And so I completely agree. Building that is the number one thing. And some of these these benefits will start to show themselves as that infrastructure strengthens and gets stronger, and that counterbalance is more effective. The means of exchange and the true, store of value or ability to exit and a unjust economy, things like that will come.
Yeah.
But my big caveat to this one is that one of my first experiences with Bitcoin was I was down living in Argentina, and one of the first times I was ever exposed to Bitcoin as a concept was I was living in a house down there, and it was a big family party, and one of the cousins came over. He's a security researcher, software engineer, and he was just telling me all about Bitcoin. It was one of my first real introductions where someone sat me down and was, actually doing the shilling that we have come to know, we've all become very familiar with. And I left Argentina for a while. They went through a couple defaults, and I keep on, being in communication with this guy, and it genuinely was a store of value that allowed him to opt out of the economic madness that was occurring down in Argentina.
Right.
And it was one of these great moments where, it wasn't happening in any widespread capacity, but this guy was interested in it, knew the potential of it. I don't think he was necessarily initially thinking it was going to be the thing that saves his life savings versus, his family and friends that maybe didn't quite come out as well, but it ended up doing that. And so, it was one of those incredible moments of just hit you on the head, clear use case on a very micro level that we're hoping to build even more.
Yeah. But I don't even see that as a caveat, right? Because that is it functioning as the opt-out, the car riding alongside the train that's going off the tracks, wherever it may be, it is that opt-out. And whether you're in Laos or in Argentina or the US or Canada, if you feel like the system is unsustainable or is robbing you of value or whatever, then just the simple fact that you now have an option to opt out in the way that Bitcoin allows you to do so is extremely powerful. I guess I was more referring to people always bring up it's not very practical to pay for a coffee, or at least it wasn't, a couple years ago. And, the thinking is always that's not a massive problem. I get it. It'll be cool. And I think that will ultimately come, but that's not that's not the big game here. That's just a kind of thing that's going to be cool and great, and it's going to be a part of it. But there's not major problems in the world as a result of not being able to, or having to buy coffee with your US dollar or your Lao Kip. That's not a huge thing,
I completely agree. And for someone who actually enables people to buy coffee with Bitcoin right now, the way I think about it is that, Fold was initially started, to not as hey, how can you become a better PayPal or a better Visa, faster, cheaper, whatever. It was actually to give Bitcoiners a way to say, this currency is real. I'm in public. I'm using it. And I can show friends and family that. And for the rest of the world, that actually is an issue with it, of understanding how to engage with it. And yes, the actual exchange and use of it to buy coffee is not as important as the moment and ritual of showing that it is valuable to other people, it can be used and it can be pushed back and forth without any intermediary. That was the real thing. Now, a bunch of other people said, the real thing is actually it's cheaper and it's going to be faster and it's going to be better. And so they did all these other, crazy things to try to make that, they started their own experiment to figure out how that would go. And we all know how that's kind of ending up.
Yeah.
For us, we've always known that payments and things like everyday uses of it are also incredibly effective means of evangelizing it and just getting it visible to the rest of the world. So you start to look at the guy down in Argentina or in Laos. It's the adoption where the train goes off the tracks. One person is going to realize it. They're going to succeed and have benefited because they were ahead of the game. They realized something before anyone else did. Now, if we can do things that just put Bitcoin more present in just everyday life, more and more people have the ability to discover it. And more people can start to use it for the other advantages that may have. And so I think overall, the coffee thing has been a really interesting narrative of how it changes. But for us, and for me, how I always believe is that it is more about the coffee being more a symbol of everyday front and center. This is part of our culture and visible here, rather than, hey, I got this for cheaper and faster than my credit card.
Right. And how powerful will it be when in the circumstances where it happens now, where you can use Bitcoin to more quickly and with less fees buy a coffee, but then also to whatever naysayers are around say, see, I can do it even better, but I'm not. And you get them to think about why you might not be doing that. You know what I mean?
So I mean, this is what we're working on. Part of the issue is that, a lot of those people who went to go buy that coffee on chain, people were like, okay, I get it. Somebody values that Bitcoin. It's a bigger thing than just you telling me about it all the time. It has a whole ecosystem built around it. But I just watched you do it, and you waited in line for 10 minutes, and I did see a fee there for $3, and the cup of coffee was $2.50. It had this even element of, this isn't, okay, I see it, I see the ritual, it's visible, but it's clearly not a better, thing. And so part of what we were doing at Fold is when we saw, how on-chain and medium exchange on the base chain was never going to be where any kind of everyday payments happen. And so if we were going to use this as a vehicle of evangelization or a Trojan horse, we need it to actually start to meet some types of standards. And so for us, we knew that was really going to come out in layer 2. And we really looked at, okay, how do we actually make the experience something that is at the level of what a everyday person would expect. And so they expect to be rewarded for using it, not onerous fees, all of these things. And that comes with layer 2. And so for us, it was like, okay, it's actually possible right now to deliver that experience. And so with Fold, that was something that I think we're fairly close to doing, save major regulatory changes on how Bitcoin is taxed in everyday usage. The day is very close where the actual cup of coffee may be cheaper and faster.
Right. So I think maybe this is a good time, before we get too much further, to actually break into exactly what Fold is for people that aren't familiar with it and exactly how it works.
Yeah, of course. So Fold's, our vision is to make Bitcoin more accessible and rewarding to just everyday people. Our goal is to onboard millions of people into Bitcoin, new Bitcoiners, mint new ones. And so the way that we do it is we allow you to earn Bitcoin for shopping at retailers, whether that's with your credit card or with your Lightning wallet or Bitcoin. And so what we do is we connect into these retailers, and essentially you send us Bitcoin through Lightning or a credit card payment, and we convert that into a gift card or store credit or prepaid credit at these retailers. And we give you Bitcoin as a kind of a cashback reward. And so the idea is that we create a really accessible way for anybody to start gaining exposure to the asset who may be curious about it, but not ready to sign up for, Kraken and, go through KYC and, look at the price charts flowing green and red candles everywhere that are actually just overwhelming for a lot of people, and give another way of people to gain exposure where the barrier to entry is much, much lower, with the idea that the product inherently allows them to start learning more about Bitcoin, its use as something that can be used every day, can be stored. And so we feel that, Fold is an engine for showing Bitcoin as both a savings technology and a payments technology.
Right. And what was the reasoning for going with, getting Bitcoin back when you spend fiat and Bitcoin back when you spend Bitcoin? And is the rate between the two rewards different, or is it the same just depending on your USD value spent?
Yeah, I mean, the Fold historically has been about Bitcoin payments. And then we said, okay, we're going to have to make this. We want to expose more people to Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin. We need to incentivize them to Bitcoin. One of the things about Fold, it's really not, we can talk as much as we want about a new monetary system, financial sovereignty, privacy, all of these things. But Fold has been in the trenches at checkout lines with regular people for a long time. And we know the way that you change behavior is through incentives, not through talking at them or, throwing large, Bitcoin buzzwords at them. But you actually have real incentives. And so we instated Bitcoin-backed rewards. We previously did discounts. We moved to rewards because our retailers actually like that model better, and we find that users can start to accumulate. This is a great way for people to accumulate. If you're already going to buy that coffee, you can accumulate Bitcoin doing so. And so that was going really well, and that we were getting the market for us increased. We had more exposure to more people. We were onboarding people into Lightning wallets and Bitcoin. And then the next thing is, okay, now that the product and the infrastructure is ready to go, now we're ready to introduce this to millions of people. And how do you do that is to actually meet them where they are at right now, today. And right now, when people make payments, they're doing it with their credit card. And that's just the reality. And so when we instated credit and debit payments, that was the idea, is meeting consumers where they're currently conducting their everyday shopping today and allowing them to earn that same cash back. And so for us, it was really lowering the barrier to entry even more to become a way that we can truly onboard and reach brand new people who may have been curious about Bitcoin or have thought about it, but haven't quite taken the step of, buying it, for instance.
Yeah. And so when did you institute the fiat purchases with Bitcoin back rewards? When did that first start?
So that started in September, I believe. Yeah, around September.
And what's the response been like so far? Because I imagine that people are more inclined to spend fiat and get Bitcoin back rather than spend Bitcoin. But obviously you have a legacy of doing the latter.
Yeah. So our spread right now is about 70% is USD transactions, 30% in Bitcoin. Fold is growing. We're growing over 100% per month, and that really has to do with the fact that we added fiat.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that when you use Fold, we still have to deal with all of the negative things about the existing financial system or payments infrastructure when we accepted credit cards, which means we're taking a 3% hit on every single transaction. We're putting ourselves up to chargebacks and the use of stolen cards and things like this that eat into, what we can offer back as a cashback reward. And so when you use Fold, you're able to earn on average 5% back with a credit card. But if you use Bitcoin via the Lightning Network, we give all of the savings back without, all of the issues with processing fees and chargebacks. We give that all back to you. So you on average earn 3 to 4% more back when you use your Lightning wallet or Bitcoin.
Interesting. But still, people want to hold on to that orange coin, right?
Yes. And so but it's funny, right? When, this is all an experiment for us about how people use it, because we are onboarding brand new people who have just been curious, have heard about Bitcoin. They don't understand it necessarily as a store of value. So we get support tickets coming in from, people who this is their first Bitcoin they've had. And they say, okay, do I spend this Bitcoin? Do I hold it? Do I not? And it's really helping us to figure out, our job primarily, because if we are truly trying to be one of the first ways that people experience this asset, it is also our responsibility to educate them about it. And we truly believe that it should be your choice what to do with it, as long as we're arming you with the right education. And so that's one of the things we're working on is, how do you onboard them into a wallet? What's the right wallet for them to get into? How should they think about this asset as a payments or a spending technology, or a savings technology? And that's actually different for every person. It's up to us to make it really clear for them so that they can make, the right decision on their own.
Yeah. I previously thought it was only in the States. So I only recently got it from the App Store for use in Canada. Um, is it, do you, what's the process of going from one country to the next in terms of whether it's from the regulatory standpoint or from a merchant standpoint? Like, is there much extra work, or how does that process unfold?
Yeah, so we have to we deal with when we integrate new payment rails into existing payment rails, we have to follow the rules of the incumbent and traditional system. And so what that means for us is that we plug in via prepaid rails. That's gift cards, store credit, and those have their own jurisdictions that are run by issuers. And those issuers may span multiple countries, multiple continents, but it always depends retailer by retailer. And so, when you use Fold, you may be able to have access to some retailers when you're in Canada, when you're not from the others. And so for us, it's just making sure that we're hitting, the easiest things that hit the most people first. And then, of course, we're going to start building into other areas. So like right now, when you look at prepaid rails, the most established infrastructure that we can immediately plug into and get moving is in North America, Western Europe, and parts of Asia. And so that's where you're going to see the immediate growth of Fold. However, we have plans and already have ideas and already starting conversations with people outside of that. So in Latin America, for instance, there's real opportunity for us, as well as other places in the world.
Yeah. Now, I heard you speak on Marty's show that you had a distributed team. I don't think you're all working from the same place. Is that right?
Yeah, we are fully distributed. We have myself in the Bay Area. We have people in Austin, Cleveland, New York, and Atlanta, and we pretty much span, all over the place. People have moved around. People have come to live next to each other for a while and then moved away. It really is something that we are, number one, have found. That's how we find the best talent. As a new startup that is trying to find the most talented people first, this is an incredible edge and lifestyle and way of working that we can offer that not everybody else can. But also, we truly believe that Fold, as we grow, will need to, as we move into Western Europe, as we move into Asia, as we move into Latin America, our team needs to be able to respond the same way. And if we're hoping to run lean, that's another tenet that we have, is that we're going to need to, from the base, build up a remote culture that is strong as a remote culture first, to then build out these kind of ways to allow us to expand faster, while maintaining some kind of continuity between, wherever region you're in.
Right. And so obviously there's some other players in the kind of Bitcoin back, rebates market. There's Lolly, there's Pay, maybe there's some others that I'm not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
What are the differences between, other than maybe merchants and the rate of the rebate or the reward?
Yeah.
What are the differences between these different service providers?
Yeah, I mean, so all of the SATS-backed companies are essentially plugging into existing flows of cash that retailers have historically used to incentivize new customers. Fold plugs into prepaid cards, which is gift cards. 93% of Americans are going to spend or use a gift card every single year. Retailers use them to get new customers, to get more loyalty. Starbucks is almost moving their entire POS systems to their own kind of gift card prepaid system. And so that's one, and that's how Fold plugs in. And the reason why we do that is because we can power the payment and the reward. So when you use Fold, you actually have a credit card with us. You have your Lightning wallet with us, and you spend through us at these retailers. And so that gives us all kinds of new benefits, besides just having the rewards piece. Other SATS-backed companies have plugged into things like affiliate programs, where retailers will say, we're starving for new customers, and we're going to pay you X amount per transaction to bring them to us. And so, things like the browser extensions that are out there, Lolly being one of them, those ones plug into affiliates that are mostly online, and they work where you don't actually have a payment with them, but you're getting rewards because they're bringing new customers and new loyalty to these merchants. And those merchants will pay them back at a later date. And pay works, virtually, similarly, but they link it to your credit card. And so the high level difference is just what system are you plugging into that's an existing historical system that we can get immediately moving now and start shifting the flow of money from cash back or airline miles or points, and then flow that money into Bitcoin. If all of the Bitcoin that was distributed last year, or all of the rewards that were distributed last year were distributed in Bitcoin, 16 million Bitcoin would have been distributed to Americans alone. And so you start to see how you can start to shift existing incumbent, tried and true mechanisms that have been around for a long time, and you can just shift the funnel right into Bitcoin and have huge effects very, very quickly. And that's what we're seeing with Sats Back, is that number one, a lot of people want Bitcoin who can't really get it right now or don't want to go through the existing channels. So all of these Sats Back companies are lowering the barrier to entry for that. And then number two, all these retailers have this infrastructure already set up for us to get going relatively quickly and start diverting the flow of cash into Bitcoin as opposed to whatever system.
Yeah, I'm super excited by services like this because, as Bitcoiners, we've had the conversation with probably hundreds of people in our lives over the course of years, right? And very rarely is it like, a really compelling case that like really lands and they pick it up and they're like, damn, I didn't realize I got to get my hands on some of this stuff. There's a lot of apprehension, a lot of, doubt and stuff like that. But just telling someone who's not interested in this stuff at all, saying, next time you go to buy something, use this app, and without any work, you don't have to worry about investing, you don't have to worry about diversity and exchanges, anything. You're going to get some Bitcoin. You don't do anything different. You still shop at Mac and get your makeup or wherever the hell it is, and you get Bitcoin back. I'm super excited to see where this industry is at in 2, 3, 5 years, because it just seems like such a frictionless way that doesn't require people to change how they live or how they spend. And they'll, as you say, they'll get their toes in the water, and they'll start just realize it'll demystify a lot of this for them. They'll be like, oh, this isn't like some super hard to understand, crazy geek technology stuff. It's just another form of money. And then they may start down on the trail of wondering what kind of money it is. And then, we know where that trail ends.
It's exactly right. And if we look at how historically Bitcoin has flowed out, initially Bitcoin is going to be mined out of the Coinbase and delivered to miners that then sell it. And then that's originally how, it started being distributed. And that, Bitcoiners started to get their hands on it who weren't miners and started to trade it a little bit, started to, just send it freely. People were setting up free Bitcoin faucets that you could just pull, Bitcoin out of in the early days. And then it started to shift to, set someone up with a wallet and then, hey, convince you and send it to you. You couldn't really do anything with it, but you could just explain it. And then things like the idea of, what else can we arm Bitcoiners with to essentially evangelize this system? And this is all Sats Back, easier UX and wallets. All of these things are essentially arming all of us that are listening to this podcast with easier means of spreading the virus to others.
Yeah.
And so you look at, another great project I'm looking at is Give Bitcoin project. It's another one that's looking at an everyday thing that happens every day and flows of billions of dollars every year of the act of earning rewards for shopping, or in Give Bitcoin's case, the act of giving a gift to somebody. We start to then take on these existing behaviors, these ways that are ingrained in our culture that people are familiar with, and just tweaking it a little bit to then bring them into this new world that we're trying to introduce them to. And so I think there's a lot more things that we're going to uncover, new mechanisms that exist today that people are going to find ways of just tweaking it a little bit to turn it into a massively efficient funnel for new Bitcoiners.
Yeah. So exciting, and I totally agree. Just one question I skipped over with regards to kind of the nuts and bolts of things. Do you have to establish, because the Canadian merchants was something that I was excited about, and I actually just made a big Best Buy purchase today, but I don't think Best Buy Canada is available on the platform. But do you have to establish relationships with all the merchants that you work with to get whatever deal you get for the? Because I presume the way it works is I'm a Fold user. I buy the Home Depot card. You're kind of the intermediary. You get $100 Home Depot card for $80 from Home Depot. Is that kind of how it works? And that's how you're able
Yeah.
to give back?
So all sats back companies are dealing with the same. So there are established ways that you can go to retailers and get approved to be either a reseller of prepaid access, which is us, or a affiliate marketer on their behalf.
Right.
There are websites you can go up, you sign up with your name, you say what you're doing, and the retailer will approve you. And for us, the way it works with us, we need to go to issuers who manage these prepaid programs. For these retailers. We need to get whitelisted that our technology is safe and that we're, generally past the standards needed to, at least be a partner with them. And then the next step is then we're introduced to the retailers, and that's where we get to negotiate, the discount that we get that we pass on to the users, making sure that their brand is shown in the right way. And that's where it, kind of gets into more of the actual approval process. And that's true whether you're doing it through an affiliate or you're doing it through prepaid. There's always an element of having to be going through this actual approval process, but it is all going through these established channels that are already there, just giving it our own Bitcoin spin.
Do the merchants give a shit that it's you guys are rewarding your shoppers with Bitcoin, or do they just see it's all the same? They're bringing more business to us. We don't give a shit what you turn it into and give it back to people.
It totally depends on the retailer. Each retailer has its own culture, its own ideas of what they do. Are they conservative? Are they, pretty progressive about how they want to engage? Are they scrapping for new customers and they need new people badly? And so this is an easy way to open up a new market. It completely depends. And that's like one of my main jobs is to really understand what these retailers need so that we can, position why and sell Bitcoin, why they should be doing it. Now, the harder sell is that you should accept Bitcoin, or that we should allow people to spend Bitcoin there, and that's a conversation we don't really need to have with them, because the way our negotiations work is that we just get access to prepaid, and so we're selling that regardless of what is coming in. It doesn't really matter. It's more about how are we rewarding and driving new customers to them. Now, we are very ready, and there's several retailers we're already talking to about, okay, tell me about Bitcoin. Tell me about the Lightning Network. And so their ears perk up when they see, well, when a Fold user goes to your retailer, they're the only person who is not going to have chargebacks involved in their purchase with you, and no processing fees and chargebacks. And so then they start to look and they say, okay, we're a retailer that's billions of dollars of volume a year, and chargebacks are a $30 billion headache for them. That starts to become a very, very attractive thing for them to at least consider and start to look at. And so it's not our job right now to force them on it or to immediately get, the largest retailers accepting Bitcoin natively. That's not the goal right now. The goal is to get them educated about this asset. And so when we look at, it's mostly teaching them about the difference between a push and a pull payment. Why is Bitcoin final? Why can you not have a chargeback with Bitcoin? And they start to look at that. And again, we're talking only through incentives. So we're not saying, it is about financial sovereignty and, anything like this. It's not how we're starting the conversation. We're saying this can have real economic impact. And already all the volume that's going through Fold, we're saving them 2 to 3%. Plus another 2 to 3% in the reduction in chargeback exposure that they have. So they can easily start to do the math on their entire business model, and at least it starts to begin the path down what is this asset, learning more, and continuing the discussion with Fold.
Right. And so I get that when you go into the pitches, you focus, obviously on, hey man.
Knew it wasn't going to be perfect.
What happened?
I think I accidentally hit
Oh,
the
okay. I thought your phone died or
up
something. Um, no, what I was saying was, I get that you go in and obviously you're framing it in terms of how they can benefit from partnering up with you guys. They don't need the whole Bitcoin philosophy and, shaking up the world and that whole thing. But what are kind of just the reflexive reactions when you go into these pitch meetings? They probably know that Fold is a Bitcoin company. What is it like? Curiosity? Is it indifference? Is it ridicule? What is kind of the most common vibe that you get from the people that you're pitching?
it is so fun to see because uh, the most encouraging thing is that you start to realize that there are Bitcoiners everywhere. In the most conservative retailers, there's always someone well placed, and that often is what helps us get meetings too.
Right.
Is that someone is just interested in it, gets it, and is just helping you out. Now they're not like cheerleading, but they are opening doors, and so that's number one. That's a good thing to see. Now the bad thing is that all of the FUD that you have seen over the last 10 years comes in full force. Part of the reason of they're hesitant is Bitcoin. Isn't that the thing that X use? And insert any kind of bad person or negative use of any type of currency. That's that is something that we're automatically having to combat. I've talked to um, environmentally conscious retailers who market themselves with that, and the FUD around is Bitcoin a waste of energy, or should we be that stuff starts to come up, and it's no different than all of the other FUD that we've been fighting on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I imagine it's real hard when when the conversation does go down those roads. I mean, because anytime I've been really asked to explain Bitcoin, it's like it's hard not to start at the foundation of like what is money and how, and
Yeah,
that whole thing. And obviously in a pitch meeting, you don't want to sit
good.
someone down and be like, "Have you ever thought about what money is?" You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? But I can imagine, it's interesting, and I'm not surprised to hear those sort of questions pop up and those sort of concerns. And to your point, like you've said that, and now we have the CEO of Backed has just become a senator, right? And we've got the people in Congress that over the past year have spoke up about. I feel like we're Bitcoiners are just like this massive sleeper cell army, right? And we're all just like biding our time and strengthening our defenses and doing our thing until such time when it actually pops off and emerges, we're going to realize that it was always a much bigger thing than we thought it was. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because you're right. They're everywhere, and you just got to scratch the surface, and you end up finding people every now and then in places where maybe you least expected it.
I love that vision of the sleeper cell, and it's also not only already minted Bitcoiners. There are genuinely people who are just open to this idea because what they see in this world plainly makes the core tenets of Bitcoin something at least curious or interesting to them. Because you can look around, and the whole Bitcoin fixes this meme, is one thing internally, but people do see that things are broken externally, and maybe Bitcoin's not the solution for that, but a lot of people are coming to the point where normal ways of dealing with stuff are clearly not working, and so more and more people start to be open to new things, and there's not such a reflexive, response to what it could be. And so
One
I,
hundred,
I,
one
I
hundred
totally
percent. Yeah, my experience over the last even just 6 months in having these conversations. I mean, right before this, we hopped on this call. I was down, at a brew pub, seeing a couple friends I hadn't seen in a long time, and they're in media and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And these conversations would have just fell on deaf ears, a year plus ago. And now when I break into it, I get like wide-eyed attention. And the biggest bullish indicator that I maybe have ever gotten, and I tweeted about this a couple days ago, but it was after like Sunday dinner one night. I was sitting on the couch with my sister. We are watching football, and she just looked at me and said, "How many Bitcoin do you own?" And I said, "It's none of your fucking business." And then she went on to ask me all these questions, and she's God love her. She's amazing, but she's not into tech or economics or politics or any of that stuff. And the fact that she reamed off about 10, 15 questions before my admittedly long-winded answers kind of she had tapped out at about 30 minutes. But that for
Impressive.
me, that's a huge indicator. And I was like, what is going on? Like something is trickling down or trickling through or
Bullish.
getting through. Yeah,
Bullish.
bullish as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Relevant to myself and Canadian residents, so we won't spend too much time on this. But what is the process of? Well, first of all, is there much uptake in Canada for users of Fold? Because I get the sense that Canada's kind of like not that interest. Well, first of all, not that aware or interested or conscious really of money and the issues that are in the states are so there's so much it's so easy to find information on them, like the Federal Reserve and how money works and the history of the dollar and gold and all that stuff. There's not much of that, and I don't there's not much chatter about Bitcoin. So I'm interested to hear from you what your experience with Canadian users has been like.
I think we need to connect with some of the kind of more research, Bitcoin research, um, you know, companies or organizations out there, because just simply seeing the worldwide flood of when is Fold going to be here, we could distribute it and on a graph and show that first of all, it is impressive how worldwide the conception of it is and how they've heard of something like Fold in Pakistan per se, or anywhere else. It's been encouraging to see that it is something that has global interest. Number one, uh, Canada specifically, we see a lot of interest there. Um, Part of it is I think the Canadians who are Bitcoiners are incredibly vocal about having the service there.
And they're
Um,
starved. I think
and, and
there's not
look,
near
they
as
see just right, exactly, right across the way. Things may be available that aren't available to them yet, and so we do know that Canada is going to be our next big area of focus. So we're going to hit Canada and the UK primarily first, with a fast follow on Mexico and Germany.
right.
Um, Now, again, like back to your other question of like, how do you make those decisions? A lot of it is based on, what rails are we using? What is the infrastructure that we're basing on, and what's the easiest to move into that also matches up with, relative interest or demand that we can see in those areas. And so, for us, we know that there is good interest in Canada. We are available technically. Some of the brands can be used there, although we're really bad at telling you which ones can be. We are fixing that, so we'll get you in touch with support about your Best Buy. Um, but we are absolutely know that is one that we can relatively easy get to, with very clear demand and people ready to rock. So.
Do you have to pitch the Canadian like entities of these mostly American retailers, or can you just pitch them at HQ somewhere in the States?
Yeah, so most of the time it's HQ, and the reason is because it all depends on what, um, So for instance, a Starbucks, our cards that you get from us can be used in Canada, Mexico, Hong Kong, Singapore, the UK, and
Wow.
that's just all how Starbucks has chosen how to run its POS systems essentially. Because one thing about Fold is that we lower the barrier to entry for consumers, but also merchants. We make sure that you don't have to ship any new hardware, software, or new training to any of your cashiers. Fold can just be up and running once you give us the go ahead. And we work wherever your POS system works. Whether you're scanning codes at a register, or you have alphanumeric codes that deep link into your app, or whatever it is, Fold will natively work with it because we meet the merchants at how they're already doing business. And so we make it very easy for them to say, okay, you're going to bring us new customers and we don't have to do anything, and we're already working with other people that do this. Fair enough. Let's go.
Do you work with any restaurants, like big restaurant chains in Canada?
We have, in Canada, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that. We're about to release a big restaurant, a big restaurant group that has a series of several chains. Um, So I will check into that, see if they qualify.
And do you think it would ever work? I guess the economics for consumer facing retail and maybe B2B is a bit different, but would it be ever possible, do you think, like your Costco's and your Cisco's and suppliers of various kinds like would be available on the platform, or are they looking at other types of rewards or markets or something?
So again, it's so when you look at Fold generally, the highest cash back levels you're going to get are people that sell digital goods or things with
Higher
things like
margins.
airline miles, higher margins, or airlines or hotels. The lowest margins are the ones where businesses have the lowest margins. And so, like a Target or an Amazon, it's on the lower end. Amazon has, I believe, 2% cash back with credit card, 4% with Bitcoin. Um, but, when you think about a Costco, which its entire model is based on having razor thin margins and making everything on the membership, that's really hard for them to give up, um, you know, that for them. However, there are certain things, and we are looking at models that may work for them because the thinner the margin you get are more often services that touch people every day and that people interact with every day. So
Yeah.
we know that it's important to be there.
What's the approach to, this is obvious, has always been a topic with Bitcoin, but seems to be uh, increasingly so these days. But what's your approach to privacy at Fold?
So, um, you know, one of our kind of visions about what we do and what we think is unique about Folds versus other Sats Back or any other other payment companies is that we're not just trying to tack on Bitcoin onto a payments or a gateway or a rewards and just switch out USD or airline miles and just put Bitcoin in there. We're actually trying to remake these systems in ways that bring Bitcoin Big B, the ethos of it, the value system of Bitcoin, and Trojan horse it into these existing infrastructures. And so with Fold, one of the benefits is that prepaid cards and things like that have been a hallmark for privacy conscious individuals for a very long time. It's you've got your ad blocker, you've got your Tor browser, you have prepaid cards and whatever. You have a whole suite of things. Um, and we package that, and it's just part of the natural plumbing to allow every consumer naturally when they use us, when they go to the register and swipe their card, to allow them to do it in a way that they're not giving up any personal data, no transaction details, and no location history. And so, when you swipe your card with Fold, or when you add your card to Fold, that your processor only sees a payment to Fold, and the retailer only sees a payment from Fold. And so, and the only thing that Fold sees of you is that you spent um, this much at this retailer, but not a location of a retailer. It could be anywhere where that retailer does business, online, in store. And so,
But
we
has
essentially,
your personal information too, right, as part of your credit card info?
so we don't touch that. So that happens all in. So our processor fully PCI compliant. So Fold technically doesn't see any of it either. And so what happens is everybody is completely disintermediated from actually being at a point where they actually could have that data. So the retailer is separated, your bank is separated, even our processor is separated because only the processor is seeing that you paid us. And so all of it is working to essentially obfuscate, what data is being shared at any given moment.
Right.
Now, there are plenty of ways, and you can always be more private, but that alone is leaps and bounds better than what the current system offers to everyday people. When you swipe your credit card at a given spot, you're giving it your location data, personal details to at minimum 6 people or 6 groups, and all those 6 groups have licenses and contracts to sell it out to who knows who. And so, the very fact of coming in and using Fold for the payment, number one, you're going to get Bitcoin cash back, but you're also going to make sure that none of that flow of data is going into those existing channels.
Right. Um, what's the hardest part about doing all this for you? I mean, it seems like you travel a lot, but And it's super exciting. Obviously, what doesn't matter what you're doing in the Bitcoin industry, it's just incredibly exciting, and hope for the future, all that kind of stuff. But day to day grind wise, what's the most challenging aspect for you?
My background is building businesses, technology, products, in consumer, in payments, and so on the surface, it's I'm building something, trying to make it worthwhile for people, something I believe in, and something that's an actual business, not for you know hyper Bitcoinization in 10, 20, 50 years, but like right now business. And that's hard no matter what you're doing to build a product and an actual business on that. But I think the hardest thing is that there is an element when you are working in, with Bitcoin and trying to evangelize it to the people that you are, there's more attack vectors that make life a little bit more difficult. Like the conversations with merchants, much harder. The conversations with banks to bank us, harder. Processors, harder. So all of these things we have to jump through so many more hoops than any other business would normally have to do. And we have to maintain a level and a standard of compliance and behavior that is far and above what would be allowed for any normal other cashback company or payment gateway.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the nature that we don't hide what we do. We are very open, and we're trying to provide a model of really what Bitcoiners and what Bitcoin can do for you. Change, add another profile of what it can be, and that comes with a lot more friction than any of the other businesses I've had. Even regardless, it's just hard to run a business and build something new.
Mm-hmm.
This adds the extra little layer that we get to deal with.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier that you were growing at a clip of about 100% per month, right?
So we grew even over last month. So November over October, I believe, is 156%.
Right. So
Now,
that's
we get
but
the benefit of Black Friday and stuff too.
sure, sure, fair enough. But by any metric, that's remarkable, right? So where do you where do you see Fold in 1 year, 5 years? Where do you see that? How do you see this playing out?
I mean, fundamentally, what we're doing is we just want to create a better way for people to earn and use Bitcoin, and more of anything, it's to have a better relationship to money. And we're just changing the infrastructure of how they do that. We're creating a technology that introduces them to a new currency, and not just introducing to a new currency. It's not just, hey, we're going to give you Bitcoin instead of cash back. That's very easy. That's something that I believe will be ubiquitous in the next 5 years. Everyone will offer Bitcoin as an option. It's just a better reward fundamentally. But the real challenge in the real business is introducing that Bitcoin big B, the values and the ethos about becoming a payments company, a rewards company, an e-commerce company that fundamentally reflects those values and brings them to the heart of retail and everyday shopping and transactions that we can expect. So providing a wonderful user experience that just works differently, that doesn't use your data against you or freely, gives it out to the highest bidder. That there's more consent involved. There's more control at a personal level. That brings these values and ideas to the forefront. And so, for us, in 10, 20 years for us, we like to completely change how the standard from which a payment or a rewards company is judged by. That the respect for the customer, respect for the consumer, and we believe ultimately makes a better business for the merchant. We're going to create the product that allows them to freely adopt that seamlessly without giving up much.
I love that, man. I totally love that. Last question, and then if you've got time, I'll do some of the rapid fires with you. You cool with that?
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So I noticed from your LinkedIn that you have a bachelor's in rhetoric. I was just interested in what that means and what you learned in such a pursuit.
Yeah, good question. That's still a pursuit that I have. No, in fact, it was one of the best decisions I made. I owe a lot to the education that I got. I really valued that. And so rhetoric is actually the oldest the oldest major in existence in kind of higher education. It was one of the first that was created, and essentially, it's the idea of how people um, tell stories to each other and convince them of what the world is or what the world should be. So we have a bunch of ways of doing that. We have science that creates this very specific way of of measurements and ways of looking at the world that says this is how we find truth. We have people in religion, in business, in just about everything. We all share different forms of rhetoric that we use on a daily basis to try to convince other people what is real in the world and to convince ourselves what is real. And so rhetoric is really just the study of that. It's the study of how scientific revolutions changed value systems, or it's how religions came to be formed. It's the history of science. It's an extremely broad major, but really is a very specific thing it's looking at. It's how do we use language and stories to come to consensus about what is real in this world, and what are the things you need to do to make that idea successful. And so for me, when I think about Bitcoin, it's such a perfect place that I love to be in, because that is the challenge of what we're currently doing. Is we are offering an entire new world. You and I are currently developing like this meme culture, this maximalist approach is all hardening a rhetoric around how to explain what we do, but provide a world that other people can actually think about and be accessible to. And so, we're all world building here, and rhetoric is really the study of how people have done world building in the past.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was going to say the exact same thing. I was like, man, Bitcoin must provide you a lot of fodder for that intellectual pursuit or that education that you received, because obviously it's so rich in so many ways, and like you said, we're all just I like to think of it dancing around this fire and smashing together narratives and trying to see like what feels and sounds and resonates with us the most truthfully, the most genuinely about this thing. And then we play with that one for a while and we find the holes in it, and we, whatever is weak, we get rid of, whatever's strong, we take forward. And this ongoing process of doing that is well, it's why I do this podcast, and it's why a lot of us talk about this all the time, and it's why people are so, you could call it toxic on Twitter, you could call it adamant, whatever you want to call it, is because people are really trying to figure out what, the quote unquote truth of this thing is. And, people find a truth, they dig in, and then they fight it with another truth. And then usually one tends to, win over another, and that one becomes more adopted. And it's such a fascinating process, because not only is that process fascinating, but what Bitcoin is transforming in real time. So yes, the truth of what it was 5 years ago is somewhat different from the truth of what it was or what it is now. And yes, so it's just this amazing interplay back and forth between what it is, what we understand it to be, and then like ping ponging it back and forth, because both are constantly changing.
I could not agree more. And that's like, people say, oh God, how many more podcasts do we need in Bitcoin? I'm like, more. All of it is putting up mirrors to ourselves as we have these conversations, hardening narratives, challenging it, just accidentally stumbling, like you're, being in these Telegram groups, whatever. People will accidentally stumble into these memes that go wildfire throughout, the way, stacking sats, for instance, and like all of these other things, that it only works because we are constantly having this feedback loop, and we often talk about the same stuff over and over and over, but that is just part of the work that needs to be done. And so, when you think about this project that we're building, it's not a technology. A little bit of it is, and the builders are building it, protocol developers are working on it, but it's as much, and if not more, a social experiment as well. And so that is why, this world in progress, we could not be in the same place without people like yourself, content creators who are putting up this mirror to everybody and providing this very public display of, of discourse, of back and forth that just, hardens it, sharpens it, and allows us to continuously grow, because, you're not going to just grow Bitcoin at the world. It's something that's going to grow with it, and it does change. So, that's why I love being with it. It's one of the most fascinating areas of work I've been in, and one of the most interesting things I can think, to dedicate myself to, because it is such a rich project in that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is why, of course, I understand when people say, "Oh, not another Bitcoin podcast," because a lot of people are jumping into it now. But one, I agree with you. I just think the more the better, because yeah, you'll get a lot of overkill, but it increases the likelihood you'll get something unique as well, and that's what that is the whole point. And you never know. You can intellectualize this as much as you want, but nobody could have like come up with a strategy. So Matt Odell, right, who popularized stack and sats, right? That wasn't like some focus group that came up for a way like, how are we going to really like generate a meme that's going to literally like really and like bring together the community and really resonate with everybody and form the foundation for how people actually approach this, at least for a period of time. That would have happened, but just by virtue of being interested and passionate and convicted and having these conversations, that just pops into someone's head who's coming from a certain perspective and background and use of language and all of that kind of stuff, and it pops up and people go, I like that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Absolutely.
That sounds truthful. And the more voices we have, talking about this stuff, back and forth, the more it's likely that another little nugget of truth is just going to pop out someday, and it's going to have a way larger. It's going to have this big impact that neither of the people that were in conversation nor anybody listening probably expects. But that's what's so cool and exciting about this thing. We're dancing around something that's so, the magnitude is so big on so many levels that it will extract and it'll extract those nuggets of truth that we even accidentally say from time to time, and they'll end up having a big impact across the social matrix that you were referring to.
I couldn't agree more, and it's so obvious. Like, you look at any of the other projects that don't have this social layer, they collapse. They collapse so easily, and so this is entirely about people work on strengthening the protocol, people work on strengthening application and use case, and people work on strengthening the narrative, and it's all needs to play together, and it's just so fun to watch it happen in real time, and can be frustrating at times, but overall very worth it.
I agree. All right, I'll hit you with these rapid fire now. You just however long you want to answer is totally up to you. First one is, what is money?
What is money? Money is relationships, exchange. It's how we interact with one another. We have words and we have money.
If you had to explain Bitcoin to a 10-year-old, what would you say?
It's money. He doesn't need it no more. Doesn't know much.
How will you know if Bitcoin has failed?
I would say how we know if Bitcoin has failed, um, when price goes to zero. I don't think it can fail otherwise.
What does Bitcoin success or Bitcoin succeeding look like to you?
It's when we have seen the things we've always dreamed of, making the world better in these little ways, and they're so much better that we start to actually see the problems that it starts to create as a result of those great things that have come with it. When the effect of it is here and we start to finally see the success, that the actual incumbent problems that will inevitably come up as a result of moving to a new monetary system will start to bear itself. And then those are your new problems to solve.
Interesting. I like that. You have one resource, a book, an article, a podcast episode, a website, an app, to refer someone who is just coming to Bitcoin. Can't be fooled. What is it?
No, I wouldn't do that. Oh man, I mean, I love Lop's resource because it kind of cheats. It gives me all of the all that's kind of the all of the above. Um, but let's see. Yeah, I would say also just the canon. I think regardless of how repelled or excited you get, something like Bitcoin Standard, it says something, and it says it in very short amount of words, and it will make you, whether you're aligned with its politics or not, it definitely provides a cogent argument for something different.
I agree. I've gifted that book. I gifted it to my father and have recommended that my sister read it too. And it's still sitting on the bookshelf. I know neither of them have touched it yet. You can't be too forceful, but I'm
Oh
just
no,
like,
you
I
can see it
know,
collecting dust.
yeah, I know if you read that, you're gonna have some questions. So just come on, like take a weekend. It's a super short book, but I'm sure they'll pick it up someday. What other investments are you interested in, other than Bitcoin?
I mean, I would love to one day have some actual physical land. That is one thing. Investments, invest in family and friends. I think that's primarily what building a company, all of the uncertainties there. My best investment outside of building a company is you know, my fiance, families, and friends.
Amazing. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone just entering the space?
You will be frustrated, and it will not all come at once. The idea is just to have constant constant doses of it, and it will reveal itself when you're ready.
What movie or song is most related to Bitcoin in your opinion?
Someone just posted, I think, like The Big Short or something like that. And it was just incredible to see that. But I would say the real one, and one of my favorite analogies, is the Space Odyssey. The At the beginning, when the monolith or the obelisk drops off, and all the chimps are jumping around it, banging on it, and the whole movie is figuring out the relationship to what the hell this thing is without saying what it is. I think it's a really good metaphor for the project that we're embarking on.
Totally. Favorite movie clip or rant of all time? So, like in a movie, when someone just goes off on a crazy rant, is there one that stands out?
I don't know. You can't handle the truth. I don't know.
Can Bitcoin be stopped? If so, what is Bitcoin's biggest vulnerability? If not, why not?
I don't think it can be stopped. I truly believe that there will be a constant niche. It's like water; it will find a way, and that may be a small crack it lives in for a long time. It may be find itself as the ocean itself, but I don't think it can go away. Um, its biggest vulnerability um, is the social community around it losing this feedback loop that we've created. Because I think the easiest way is to just get totally fragmented. And so if we're constantly showing a mirror to ourselves, at least we're looking at the same thing and focused on strengthening it in our own ways. It's when we start to fragment when it's still very early, I think is the biggest issue. But even if we did that, it's still going to find a way.
Yeah. What is something about Bitcoin you don't understand very well or would like to spend more time learning about?
Oh my God! Someone just posted. You think people are asking, when is Bitcoin's going to be ossified, the core protocol and everything's going to one day be the same. And I think it was Marty. Someone posted all of the projects that are working in flight right now to um, to strengthen, to improve, to optimize the system that I had no clue about. And so I think I'm generally, when I work at the application layer, I can very easily lose sight of all of the work happening at the subterranean level of the laying the pipes, laying the the electrical foundation, all of that is core to its success, and a lot of it can go right over my head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a full-time job to keep up on it all, and it moves so fast and it's happening so quickly that you take your eye off it for a month and there's a lot more to look at. What is the biggest mistake you've made with Bitcoin or like a misunderstanding that you had at any point in your journey?
I think I had three initial experiences with Bitcoin before I jumped down the rabbit hole and went. And I think those experiences should have been, even individually, proof enough that this was a project that I need to be dedicating myself to or thinking about, or in number one, investing in far more heavily. Um, that I look back and I say, I don't think anybody could, it's pretty rare for people to have such pure examples of why this technology is incredible, um, and not jump totally down it right away. And so I'd say I had three chances where I totally missed it, that it was just should have been obvious in hindsight.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, literally everybody says and thinks that way. So don't beat yourself up about it too much.
You can't.
No, you can't. You got to let that shit go. What have you learned about yourself, or how have you changed, if at all, as a result of learning about and interacting with Bitcoin?
Patience. Not just yes, time preference about saving and being better with money, but also about how large. You think about you can. It's easy to look back in history and see how large changes and movements happen, and it looks like it just happens really quickly, and over a couple. Maybe a couple decades, but when you're reading a paragraph, it's like, okay, it started there, ended there. That's pretty wild. But here, I think we're living through one of them right now. And to know where we're at and to have patience to know that it's not going to go faster, regardless of how far you push it, you just need to continue going forward, and the speed will reveal itself. And so I think patience in that, just as a builder too. So time preference in many ways, but not necessarily investment.
Yeah, I agree totally. Do you have any controversial or contrarian views or opinions on Bitcoin? And if not on Bitcoin, any subject is okay.
I do not believe MMT and Keynesian economics is the devil. I believe it only is the devil when it doesn't have a balance to restrain it. And so I think number one, and one of the best, most valuable things about Bitcoin is it provides a counterweight to something that had been able to run wild for far too long. And so I truly believe that systems will live in tandem, but they'll be restrained and totally changed as a result of it.
Ballpark estimate of Bitcoin's price in 5 years.
Oh God, I'm so bad at this. Just you can go look at my trading history. Don't do it because I don't know, 5 years. Maybe we're at the trough and we're at 20K. I don't know.
Wow, conservative. Very conservative. Do you have a morning routine? If so, what is it?
Um, no real morning routine. I feed the dog, go for a walk, make the coffee, scan Twitter with like one eye open, and make sure the team is doing okay, and just jump into it. I haven't quite found the hustle porn, wake up at 4 a.m. type of thing yet, but maybe I'm missing out.
When I ask that question, everybody's always like, "Oh, the Tim Ferriss question" or whatever. And to my mind, I'm just curious. Like, is there what do you do when you wake up to make sure that you have the kind of day that you want? So I guess Tim Ferriss popularized the whole morning routine, quasi hustle porn stuff. But yeah, I'm just curious about what people do to set themselves up for a good day.
I mean, practical things: drink water right when you get up.
All right.
Have something in your stomach before you go straight for the coffee. Not a full breakfast, but just something in there, and then you should be good.
What happens if we're wrong? What will you do if we're wrong about this whole Bitcoin thing?
We had a great time. We built really cool stuff. We had a something that we believed in, which is and we not only we did something about it, which is can't be said for a lot of people. And so a life spent that way is great. And there's incredible projects throughout history that have had a spectacular promise or spectacular potential, and that failed. And a lot of those people will still live or live full lives, and some of them still remembered for just giving a shit about the possibility of it and representing that. And I think no matter what, whether this specific project as this protocol lives or dies, the effects of it have already succeeded. There's already been a plan B that has been made real that will be represented or inspire other things in the future.
Yeah, I love that response, man. And people, people say, if anything happens with Bitcoin, we'll just port the UTXO set, and that we'll be able to use that for distribution of something else or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think and I'm sure you've realized this too, but particularly me, because I get to speak with all these people and interact with people that listen to the podcast on Twitter and stuff like that. So many of us, I know, just are part of the reason why we're enamored with this space is because we're meeting all these people that we just feel this genuine connection or like we know we're thinking on very similar planes, and the connection or resonance that inspires is really something I think a lot of us were probably not getting in too many places in our social lives prior to this. And on top of that, a lot of the people just tend to be bright, motivated, passionate, like, really seemingly great, excellent people. And so, you could, sure, if something happens with the current protocol, you can port the UTXO set, but I think you could also port the people set and do something pretty amazing
Absolutely.
with that group of people should, this particular project, something go wrong with it.
Couldn't agree more.
Book that you've gifted the most, if at all, or recommended.
Oh, okay. So I just gifted. So I think I've recommended. Me being the rhetoric major, one of the foundational books for me is Nietzsche canon, Beyond Good and Evil. And so I annoy people by putting that in their stocking or whatever. They're like, I will never read this. But I think for me, it's one of the most influential kind of bedrock books I've ever read. But in terms of gifting, there is a book that I just love, and it's called Motorman by David Oley. And it was initially just passed around as a PDF, and it was never published. It was just, he wrote the book, and it was never published. It was just kind of passed around on hard drives or CD-ROM and went around. And it's just this psychedelic short book that that no matter who you are reading it, whether you come out you like it or not, you are totally changed by what happened in that book or where you went in that with the language. It's almost hard to encapsulate what it's about, because essentially it's about a guy who is going to find his doctor and then trying to leave his doctor. And it's just very short, but very something that I guarantee you everyone is going to come out being like, what the hell just happened? And have some different thoughts as a result.
What's it called again?
Motorman.
And is it publicly available?
Yes, I just bought a couple copies to give out for Christmas.
Awesome. I'll look into it. In the future, when Bitcoin hits, say, $1 million, what are you going to spend your Satoshis on that will benefit you or society? And this is a former guest question.
Oh, let's see. I will, number one, I'll be able to make those investments that currently, are I've been focused on family and Satoshi. But, after that, I would hope to get some, place to live for them, and a place that I can like pass on for future generations. But, I think it's going to reveal itself here. I think there's going to be some, things that I will love to be participating in, and that will allow me to go and do that. But, off the top of my head, oh my God, I've been too focused on trying to pump the number up there anyway. So figure that out later.
What is one question you'd like to see added to this list?
Oh my God. Okay. What about your past positioned you to care about Bitcoin?
Ooh, good one. I like that. You're going to have to answer it now.
I think so. I grew up in a very small rural town in Northern California, and there was a sense of community, local ownership, and kind of direct access to the way power worked or politics. You could at least see it. Maybe not. You're not controlling it, but you can see it in front of you, and it's there. And it's something that you can count on. It's a neighbor thing, and so I think something about something that somehow a way to coordinate people across the globe and bring it into a way that anybody can directly at least understand what's going on and have a level playing field about how the world works and rules that are there, and not be subject to things that are totally outside of where they're from or what they know or where they came from. And at least they are closer to the means of control and at least able to understand how that works, I think is a huge innovation. I think it's something that, I value a lot just from my background.
Yeah. All right. This is the last part. Should only take about 60 seconds. I'm going to say a word. You tell me the first thing that comes to your head.
All right.
Democracy.
People.
The Lightning Network.
Fast.
The Corporation.
Octopus.
Human Rights.
Good.
Choice.
Consent.
Violence.
Defend.
Ego.
Be humble.
Consensus.
Not sure it's going to work out as a company.
Wealth.
Generational.
Privacy.
Foundational. Important.
Hate speech.
Speech.
Gold.
Silver.
Guns.
Let's see here. Guns. Bang.
Revolution.
Let's go.
Socialism.
Government.
Family.
Love.
Inequality.
Always.
Hell.
Here.
Liberty.
Soon.
Energy.
Love.
And Bitcoin.
Values.
That's it, Will. That's all I got for you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, standing out there wherever you are, beside a road or on a park bench. I know it's probably not the ideal spot for you.
The middle of foggy San Francisco.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't look too sunny there.
No, definitely not. Good to see all these tourists walking around thinking they were coming to like sunny California.
Do you want to shout out any of the Fold stuff or your Twitter? Is there anything you want to share?
I'm at WLRVS on Twitter. There's foldapp.com. Check the app out, iOS, Android. But honestly, just engage with the builders that are there. Like, one of the things that we love as builders is listening to the podcasts and understanding what other people are doing and other perspectives. And I encourage people to do the same of applications that are being built. I don't care whose it is or what they're building. Engage with it, look at it, improve it, give your perspective on how it relates to the larger project if it's trying to accomplish the goal, because that only is going to make it better, and the teams I know appreciate it massively. So whatever it is.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's great advice, and yeah, I love what you guys are doing. Wish you the best of luck in your future plans, and you'll have to hit me up regarding Canadian merchants and retailers and stuff. So while I'm home, I can stack as many sats as I possibly can, especially over the Christmas, the upcoming Christmas holidays.
We will. I'll put you on the list of Canadians that need to be be aware of it right when it goes, because
exactly.
There's a lot on that waiting list.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, listen, you take care, and look forward to chatting sometime in the future.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
All right, brother. Later.